Check. Hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome. It sounds like the last panel was really exciting. Lots of insights, lots of questions.
Knock it out of the park, boys.
We're going to get started. Welcome, everyone, to Safe by Design. We're going to give our friends in the back just a minute.
You're so professional. Very good.
I'm thrilled to be here with this amazing group of gentlemen, our panelists today for Safe by Design. We were here earlier today, and I know throughout the conference, throughout the 2 days, for those of you who've been here from Thursday, safety and security has been one of the main topics that has come up in almost every single panel. So we're thrilled. We have an amazing group for you today with an extensive amount of experience in safety in events, in event production across the country and globally. And I am not going to read their bios because you have access to all their bios in the FestForum app. But we're going to dive in, give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. And if we can just dive right in, and if each of you could share what's the lens that you're bringing to today's conversation on safety. So we're just going to get started here on my left.
Cool. Good afternoon. My name is Conway Solomon. I'm the CEO and co-founder at Wristband. We're primarily an access control provider, so the lens that we're bringing is how does technology change this, whether for a small event or a large event or something in between, making it really simple and really easy to actually implement whatever the plan is that we've established for the event.
Afternoon, everybody. Gareth Gallagher, CEO of EVT Media. We are a corporate and non-corporate events agency, and I'm here really to reflect on experience of running multiple jobs and being around crisis, bombings, earthquakes, and really kind of putting my stance on that experience in general about what happens when it does happen.
Good afternoon. I'm Patrick Burns, OTW Safety, but for 25 years I was the technical director of the Utah Arts Festival in Salt Lake City, Utah. So my angle during this forum is to come at it from a small to large event, an actual boots on the ground and planning and designing a safer event for the patrons and everyone. Thank you.
Hi everybody, I'm Peter Kimball. I come from the television broadcast side of the entertainment. Been in the business for years. Since 2006, I led a technical team of truck companies and cameramen and operators such as that for pretty much every music festival in North America. Our clients are AT&T, Blue Room, Microsoft, Yahoo, YouTube. We did Bonnaroo, Coachella, you name it, every festival. We many times we did 3 festivals a weekend. So we did that through COVID, and then I've sort of stepped aside. I don't do as many of the festivals anymore. Now I'm with Program Productions and Pro Crews. I'm an advisory director. Program Productions is one of the largest labor companies in North America. And if you've watched the Super Bowl, there's a good chance the Program Productions technician or cameraman was on that show. So I'm here to talk about what we've experienced. Initially, it used to be like, oh, put some cameras out, let's go shoot the Rolling Stones, life is great. And then all of a sudden, security kind of started coming in where, how do you get information to people in a timely manner? How do you let people where to notify where they should leave? How do they exit the venue? And where's the weather forecast? So we can talk about that later, but basically I'm from the actual festival production side.
I'm Teddy Raskin. I'm the founder of CoaCore and CEO of CoaLive. We are a event managed service provider in the security space and technology provider, working with clients like Google, Live Nation, SiriusXM, and our keywords are empowerment and modernization. So giving our amazing clients and vendor partners just an ability to see what's going on in the field, what's going on in the room at the event in real-time technology so that we can reward our amazing partners partners, the jobs they're doing, and react in real time when, God forbid, there is a crisis. So just giving these amazing partners an ability to actually see in a centralized dashboard everything that's happening in one central place, and honored to be here amongst some of the most respected names in safety. So thank you, guys.
Well, thank you, everyone. We're going to dive right into sort of the planning area of safety and security. So I know some of you are starting festivals or going from a smaller festival to a larger festival. What, from each of your perspectives, where should people begin? What are they not thinking about? And what resources are available to them? So where should they get started? And we're going to start on that side of the panel.
Planning for us starts with looking at all the data sets, and I know that's not the sexiest or most fun thing to think about, but looking at historical data, thousands of events. What kind of event is this? Is it corporate? Is it non-corporate? Entertainment? What's the demographic that's going to be there? What are historical incidents, so that we can help advise our clients anything from, do we think we need 8 canine dogs or 18 canine dogs? How do we want to do a dot map? And then we're working with, of course, mixing that alchemy with the actual professionals, and Patrick, professional with boots on the ground. What do we actually see that the data is not showing us? And leaning on 10, 20, 30 years of experience with our partners to ultimately the client's going to make the decision on what they want to do. But giving them that empowerment so that when, God forbid, things do go wrong, and we know that none of us can really mitigate 100% of the risk, we at least have some answers together as to why we did what we did. We can track what happened, we have data, and we can help get better, because we all know that this needs to be a better space, especially when it comes to festivals and concerts.
With the planning for us, we pretty much, a really quick history story here is that when, like I said, when we first started doing festivals, it was all about the music. You really didn't think about security. You didn't think about COVID or weather. And then as we progressed, like say Coachella, we have 85 cameras on the ground. We have fiber optic cable throughout the whole venue. So the clients start coming to us and say, hey, we need content from gate A, B, and C. We need to see what the crowd is doing over by the Sahara stage. We need to feed content to the yurts where clients are located. So what used to be kind of just some thing that we didn't really think about became an actual major budget item of security and enabling uninterruptible communication to not only the festival attendees, but to the staff and the crew. What we do is that, sometimes Wi-Fi goes down, sometimes the wireless doesn't work. Well, we have learned, and it's pretty much tradition now, we do pretty much Kevlar-based fiber optic cable connectivity throughout a festival site. So if there is a tornado, or there is, God forbid, some kind of explosion, the communication system is still up and running. And again, you talk to Live Nation now, AEG Golden Voice, that's at the top of their list of how they can ensure informing everyone about things that are happening and how they can evacuate if necessary.
So from my perspective, to start, I think it starts with a site design, a site plan. The patron flow, how your patrons are going to flow throughout the site. You don't want them to come to what looks like an exit or entrance and it's a dead end, because if there is a situation, whether weather related, most of the things that I have to deal with in Utah are weather related so far. So you don't want them to appear that there's an exit, right? And then they're just going to bottleneck and get stopped up, bottlenecked. So I would start with site design, site planning, walk through it, put it on a map, make it a large map, do it to scale so you can actually see where things fit, and then make sure that you have egress gates at these points that look like a dead end or feel like an exit or an entrance. That's where I'd start.
Great. Yeah, I definitely echo all of those comments, particularly having been in that field where it does happen. I think for me, the most important thing is to make you guys realize the importance of safety and security, full stop. It's like all of us, we all run events, we're all budget conscious, we're all, time poor, often resource poor. And for me, part of my role is educating clients on, the necessity of having health and safety, the appropriate plans, everything from a safety management plan through to communications. I think communication in this is the number one thing that will get you through, especially when, as we've all said, God forbid it does happen, and it does. I'm here to tell you it does. And getting you through, I think, is where the start always comes from understanding the communication from the bottom up. So, and then ensuring that we apply the appropriate resources and tools to be able to do it. And I know that sometimes budgets and financial constraints are there, but there are resources, and I think we will be talking about those, about how to get the resource that you need to be able to support your events, so that the safety of your community is the number one importance. And so for me, it's really about educating you, before you're really before you go out and get your headline artists and, you put all of your effort and time into that beautiful creation, is this safe for the people that you're putting it on for?
Thank you. For us, I would say really simplifies and boils down to believing that your security system is only as strong as your weakest link, whether that's an hourly guard or a volunteer or somebody who you've given this responsibility that had 5 seconds of some on-the-job training to now be responsible and understand what was typically a, convoluted credential matrix that we can't even understand when you're, sitting in the daylight, much less nighttime. It's loud. They have a very small flashlight. So our focus has always been on, how to make sure that your security plan does not break down on site. I think that's really an important part of the technology, because the number of people, and probably everybody in this room, that has walked into a festival with nothing on except acting busy. I think we all know that it kind of just looked like you belong, and that always feels like the way to go. But simplifying or distilling it down to something that's very simple for a guard or for a volunteer into something that's very binary. Is this person allowed in here or not? Because without it, what ends up happening is so many events do a wonderful job of pre-planning and site planning, but like you said, especially when stress comes to it and things come down to the wire, a lot of times all of that goes out the window. And then it's like, why'd you do this months-long work if at the end of the day you were just going to tell everybody, for lack of better words, to come in anyway? So we try to really make sure that through the use of technology, whatever that plan is that usually professionals beyond us have established and created, is actually implemented and not broken down, and that it's avoiding those arguments between a guard and a patron going, do you know who I am? And they have no idea who you are. And so really making sure that is not, escalating into something while also keeping that throughput has been the kind of game changer for even traditional guards or events that will tell me they hate technology, and I'll come back by 20 minutes later and they're like, I love this thing. I haven't argued with a single person. So I think a lot of that comes into it, of just really recognizing what those mentalities and those personalities are like when push comes to shove and there is a patron that has spent money and you're trying to figure out how to, keep that in the right manner.
I think we just did what we were talking about in a meeting earlier today. We happened to luck out, and we were talking a little bit. And there's a lot of high maintenance guests that you want to be nice to, but you want to keep them safe. So you have to kind of tread that line where you don't want them mad at you. I mean, unless it's unless you don't care. But and I think you talked about earlier today about how do you handle people that spend thousands of dollars to come to an event, and the wrong person interacts with them, and then they leave pissed off. Excuse me.
Yeah.
I heard a lot of different things in your answers that I want to touch on, because we talked about budgets, really important. We talked about mindset. How do we flip that mindset that, yes, the budget, of course, budgets are really important. They can make or break an event, but how do we change that mindset to bring safety in early and make it an important part of the conversation? And then I heard training of volunteers and training of staff, and how critical that is to safety. So who wants to touch on any of those?
I can touch a little bit on that. The Utah Arts Festival Safety and Health Plan is a 44-page document, right? The last one that we did. So to get a volunteer, if you hand them a 44-page or send them a PDF that is 44 pages long, they're not gonna go through it. I think we could all agree on that. So what we did at the Arts Festival is we have meetings leading up to the event where we have paid staff and coordinators of about 100 people. And I would go through a couple pages at each meeting to get through the entire book by the time the festival starts. And then I would, at the very final meeting, I would review some of the things and just shout out, now what do we do if this happens? Where do we meet if we have evacuations? Who do you check on? What teams are you responsible for? Who can ultimately give a code red to clear the site? Who has that ability? And it's the chain of command and the communication. But you have to get your people trained up, as many of them as you can, because we all know that we have volunteers that show up day of, and they're the first person that your customers meet, might be this volunteer. And you have to give them the best knowledge that you can, and hopefully they're reporting to one of your coordinators or paid staff that has given them the right answers and the things that they need. So I guess I'm saying start ahead of it at meetings if you have a huge plan, which you should have a large plan that is very detailed for liability reasons anyhow. So,
Peter, I think when we were in Garrett's roundtable, you shared a story about a volunteer and what they did. Do you want to share that one?
It was a really, we talked about sometimes volunteers don't have enough skin in the game, so they don't really care if something happens. And I don't mean like all volunteers do that, but when you have a multi-million-dollar or whatever, you have a big event like that, you need everyone to be invested. And at Lollapalooza a couple of years ago, one of the, she actually was a paid security guard, mentioned some type of altercation that resulted in the park being evacuated for like 45 minutes. And it turned out she just wanted to go home early. And so, needless to say, she lost her job. I mean, it's a true story. You can look it up in the Chicago Tribune or whatever. But it was like, that's what we talked about, finding. And again, this is supposed to, we're all here because we love music, we have a passion for it, we have a passion for the industry. So we want the experience of the patron to feel that, to enjoy it. So we're here not to scare people, we're just here to how to make people's experience better and safer.
And I think Teddy and Conway, both of you can kind of talk a little bit about validating people's credentials from the technology side. So if either of you want to touch on that.
Yeah, I can hop in there. We got asked by one of our anchor clients, and this is actually, we're piloting this at an amphitheater in Nashville this year, and then also with a football league in Texas this year. But we got asked by two separate clients. They had the same issue, neither of them knew each other, that they had security staff showing up that were fired from another client, and then a subcontractor was hiring them unbeknowingly for their events. So they were seeing the same person that they had informally blacklisted from their events continuing to show up, and they were trying to find a way to mitigate this. So we built a tech in-house called COA Confirmed. It's one of our credential verification platforms that could probably find a creative way to integrate into access control, which we haven't fully done yet. And when they show up for their training, before they get to somebody like Patrick, which will never be replaced, it's really critical, they have to show their COA Confirmed pass. And the way they get that, they have to submit their license, their security ID, we API into the State Department to confirm that they're actually credentialed, and then take a mini quiz on a few key things that we align on with the client. So for the football league, it's various things, and then for the amphitheater, it's various things. And these are informed by professionals like on this panel to say, out of the 44 pages, if you were to say they need to know 5 things, what are those 5 things? And that's what we ask the client. So by the time they get to a meeting with Patrick, he already knows that he has a staff that's at least more well qualified and trained than before, and that they're literally credentialed. And we know it's public, so I'm not airing out any dirty laundry, but at Astroworld, there were plenty of security staff who were not even properly credentialed in Texas. There's technology that exists that should never happen. So these are not expensive solutions, speaking of budgeting. These are things where it doesn't cost us much money to ping an API to the state database to find out that, Peter Kimball is Peter Kimball. It's instantaneous.
Don't look me up.
So we might have to now. So those are some of the things we're working on, and the hope for us, it's our first time here at FestForums, is to continue to open source this, is to work with peers and partners to optimize these. So, Patrick has better people to diligence, our fans have better safety. We should be integrated into a wristband system so their wristband beeps or doesn't beep if they've been certified. We're finally at a technological place here where this isn't just possible, this industry is actually behind from where we're at.
Well, that's long been the case. I think from like a technology side, maybe something that's changed in my mind in the last few years is like what the definition of a credential means. Despite the name of our company, we do a lot more than just wristbands. Probably a separate panel to discuss renaming. But, it's really turned into like the credential doesn't have to mean that, oh, I've got my, like your badge around your neck. It could be something digital in your phone. It could be something that you obviously wear on your arm. It may be RFID. It may not be RFID. But at the end of the day, what it's still coming down to is, the halfway over the bridge is the process of requesting and approving the credential, and then you just let everybody, in, for lack of better words, without having a record of who went where and who was supposed to. So, a lot of our technology ends up being used for purposes like when somebody walks up and says that they left it at home. No, you didn't. You used it 5 minutes ago. Or, okay, if you did leave it at home, great, but whenever I replace this one, that other one's going to get killed. So, you can't win one over by trying to find two credentials just because one was replaced. So, we really found that agnostic of how, specific the tech is, because we have some clients that obviously, for rightful reasons, take it to the nth degree. The Boston Marathon is one of our largest clients. They just joined our portfolio a couple years ago, but given what happened at their event a decade ago, they background check every single person in their credential platform. How do you quantify that cost? I don't know, right? Especially if you haven't had an issue that has happened that's been serious enough. But in their budgets, based on what's happened, it's like that's the insurance cost that they've determined is the acceptable level of risk for the reward. Whereas, I don't know, the Ostrich Festival, which we do in Arizona, that has a random credential that nobody's trying to sneak in. They don't do, the minimal effort is okay with them because that's the risk level that they've justified that they can accept. Because you can spend as much as you want to or as little as you want to. It's all at the trade-off of like, how's your board or your owners going to feel with looking at that income statement or that line item and justifying, yes, this was worth spending $100,000 on security, or do they just try to go to the bottom and all of a sudden, especially when you have good years, meaning you don't have security issues, it's easy to slip into the, oh, well, we'll cut this back a little bit, and then something happens and people start going, well, why wasn't it more intense? And it starts the whole process over. So finding that baseline of like, this is the acceptable level of risk-reward trade-off is a lot of what the guidance is that we do for our customers, because it's not always like you got to go the most expensive. If that's too much for you, then no worries. It's like, what level of risk do you accept? I don't know if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and just to cover off a couple of points about financials, because I think that obviously this is a hot topic that comes up all of the time. It's ensuring that there are resources out there where that you can be supported, and I definitely am an advocate for making sure that you are reaching out to all of your local authorities, getting them, building relationships with them from the onset, and also a topic that came up in my roundtable this morning was working with vendors, that do already have credibility, that they are already able to put more in that can help save you on your line items in your budgets. And I think that's a really important factor here to take on when it comes to, really considering the costs and the financials, because safety has to be, paramount. We have to keep our community safe, and we have to do it in the right way. And, having been on the onslaught of when it does happen, you are in a position where we do have, as promoters or planners or whoever we may be, we do have a duty of care to every single person that's there, and I can't move away from that fact. So the financials are always a tricky and a sticking point. But what I will say also on that is it will also benefit you in the long run. If you show that you're doing this up front and you can show this, I can honestly tell you that will put you in a much better position with some of the brands, the sponsorships that you're talking to, and in the long run, any artists, because it is becoming an even more requirement for artists to ensure not only are the communities safe, but they are safe. We've seen what's happened in the last few years with bottle throwing and, all kinds of things that go on. So there are real benefits to kind of taking this on early and making it part of, your process from the very start of engaging, in any discussions that are, with brands or sponsorships or any partners that you may be working with, and actively asking them, what can you support us from? And to be honest, if we don't, in my agency, if we don't see a vendor's insurance certificate, we just don't work with them. And that's as simple as that. We won't take that risk. And I'd hope that the majority of everybody here would do the same. So there's some suggestions there that I think are very helpful, special.
Have you ever seen insurance rates change based on like a security plan a festival has?
Absolutely. And particularly, I think, in America, I think where, Europe, it's slightly, the pricing, regulatory situation is very different to what it is. But absolutely, the more prepared you are, then, you'll be able to showcase your risk assessment as being a lot lower. And so therefore your premiums, your buy-ins, all of those kind of pieces that you have associated with those will be lower in general. But it will come down to, little basic things like, making sure that your security is, your plans are in place from the very onset. Don't ever go to an insurance company without a plan. Simple as that. Not unless you want to sign up a huge check. Which, let's face it, none of us want to really do that.
Not our own money.
Yeah.
So we've talked about the planning and a little bit of the execution. But we know, everybody on this stage knows, plenty of events, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. It's going to be something's going to happen, whether it be weather-related or, active shooter or whatever the case may be, bombing. I know, Gareth, you've been in certain situations. So what happens when something goes wrong? Everything on paper looks great, but let's talk about when something goes wrong. Has your experience been? Where have things gone well? Where have things have not gone well?
I'll kick this off, as obviously it's a hot topic for me. Over the years, I've learned so much, I think, just in the way that we behave as human beings when we are faced with a crisis. And there are 3 emotional responses. There's a behavioral one, which most planners tend to be, which is, action orientated. We start, we action, we follow a plan, and we move forward. Then there's the psychological one, which is obviously, those that are distraught among communities and, that need assistance from a psychological point of view. And then there's a subjective one, which is usually somebody who's experienced a crisis and can step in to help assist with, anybody that's going through a psychological process. So that's the kind of 3 points that I've learned over time. The number one factor, I think, is communication, is making sure that that people feel safe. Like, this is the premise of what we have to do. And whether that's your, instantly sending out push notifications, you're, as Peter said earlier on, you're communicating across screens, but your team need to be as good as you, and understanding if somebody is compromised in your team, it's like you've got to action that, and what is that backup to that, and making that decision there and then who is responsible for communication in general. So whether that's PR, media, or then that's moving into authorities, you should have this structure set in place. And if anybody needs some templates, I have plenty of them from educating clients. So, I think once everyone gets over that shock factor, and then there are even more solutions depending on the severity. And I work heavily with a lot of clients, particularly in corporates at the moment. They seem to be all over it. That's why I'm making that suggestion about brands and sponsorships. But really understanding, giving yourself a matrix of what the severity level is, what fits within that matrix, and then what does that structure look like. Again, I have templates, and I can share those with people so that or you can talk to me one-on-one about how that looks. So I think that's my kind of take on, what happens is when it does. And then obviously you've got the aftermath, and again, there are teams. Something we talked about today that I educated people on is insurance. They can carry a lot of those services and those costs. So, there are needs for aftermath, whether that's to do with families, communities, whether it's fatalities that you're dealing with. A lot of that can be governed by your insurance policies or also your local authorities. And then don't forget your sponsors and their part in it as well. So that, hopefully along the chain, the supply chain, that there is multiple ways to ensure that everybody is supported, both during and post.
Pat, did you want to share anything on that in terms of your experience?
Sure. Again, mostly weather-related at the Utah Arts Festival, and when I was there wasn't quite the technology that there is now to beam into your phone that, hey, we've got a weather storm coming in. So, but everyone still uses a radio, right? A walkie-talkie, if you will. So, what we had is again, communication and a chain of command where, okay, we have a weather system in, these top channels go to the tech channel and communicate on that. Everyone else stay on their own radio station. And please keep this channel clear so that we can communicate. I mean, make a direct communications. Do not hold the button down and babble. We need to know that, hey, there's wind coming in over here and it's blowing a tent down. We need security here right now. So someone goes to security tent's coming down, and they respond. And we did have that where a large tent, 40 by 80, was actually compromised and coming down onto people, luckily slowly. And we had to clear the space, but we communicated great during the situation, all through radio, kept everyone away from that area, but didn't have to evacuate the entire site or anything like that, but kept everyone safe through direct communications and training and planning.
Peter, I know you've been in situations where you've had to evacuate large groups of people very quickly. Do you want to just share on that?
It's kind of yes. Again, it had to do with the fact that there was C3 Lollapalooza in Chicago, which is the largest urban music festival in North America. I think maybe there's a couple larger in Europe. But the fact is it's right downtown, and there's a lot of exits, which is a good thing about that. And there's a lot of support from local Chicago Police Department, which is incredible. So with help of the Chicago Police Department, we set up this evacuation system that every screen that was on our network, which anything that was set up by us was on our network, we could immediately send audio and video out to evacuate gate number 4 or tornado coming in 45 minutes or whatever. And we were very successful. I have a picture of an empty Grant Park, and everyone left. They all went into the bars in Chicago because everyone knows the main bars in Chicago. So they just all exited. They all drank for an hour and then came back. And then I think Foo Fighters was on stage, so the Foo Fighters started playing again. And it was so well done, it was like flawless. And this is kind of a sidebar, and I guess I'm a Chicago guy, so the Chicago Police Department is incredible, as I imagine anyone who does a festival in a large market. They block off streets for you. They put snow plows so you can walk down the middle of the street, so cars can't come in. We were talking earlier today, often during the festival, there's the incredibly beautiful Conrad Hilton and the Blackstone all face the park. Well, what they do during the festival is they shoot these really bright lights up in the windows, because they don't want, not to sound too morbid, they don't want active shooters to be able to look out the window and see what they're looking at. So people think, oh, it's the beauty, it's so gorgeous, these beautiful buildings. They're shooting these multi-watt bright spotlights to make it impossible to do anything out your window. And also, they also search all the rooms that face the park. And when you check into a hotel, they tell you, by the way, we're going to check your room at least once during this thing. We're not going to tell you when. So, as you know, there's been a lot of indications where people use, like the Las Vegas thing where a guy used a hotel room. So they're very proactive, and we have learned to, because it's a big city police department, they really know what they're doing, and they're very proactive. And that, I know we talked about it, so it may be different. If you have a festival in a little town that the police department's all volunteer and doesn't know what they're doing, that's something to consider. But we've had great success. Since we do all the large festivals pretty much, we've had great success with security.
We want to make sure that we have time to answer any questions you may have. I know that this is a really important topic, so I'm just gonna, I know we've talked about budgets, we've talked about execution, we've talked about the technology that's available, working with your vendors, but there's still so much that we may not have covered. So we do want to offer an opportunity to ask questions. I know we had some great questions earlier at Gareth's roundtable. Yes.
Hi, my name is Elmane, and I'm starting a festival. My question is for events, well, it's a two-part question, but for events without, well, no. Do you suggest having an event where you take phones away prior to people entering the event? Also, if so, then how do you navigate that during a crisis?
Well, why would you, I'm asking because I don't know.
Thank you in advance.
Why would you take the phones away? What's the motivation for taking the phones away? Oh, really?
Yeah, so that people are present. Also, so that anything that is content that creators don't want other people to see, so they're going on a tour, right? It's all over the place by the time they get to the next show. It's not as fun.
Yeah, I would say avoid that at all costs, because it's just one thing less. You know, it's one added stress to a very stressful situation that you just don't need. So I would really lean into the conversation with the requests of explaining the benefits and really kind of trying to pull them along with knowing that these are important tools that you need for, you know, not only just emergency crises, but, you know, general communication, you know, throughout an event, especially if it's a medical situation. It's kind of, for me, that's almost saying that their content is more important than maybe somebody who's going through some kind of, you know, it could be something as simple like somebody's dehydrated and they've lost their friends or in a very crowded, you know, space. They're claustrophobic, they're starting to have a panic attack, but they can't speak. You know, I think all of these situations are, you know, even more prevalent, especially in some of the larger scale events.
Hi, y'all. Ooh, that's loud, sorry. Okay, so we've all seen and heard the movies and documentaries and the things in newspapers about when things have gone wrong, partially because people have not put their budget towards safety and security. Do you think, like in the ticketing forum, we talked a little bit about how there are acts in different states about how it is mandatory to protect fans. Do you think that eventually it is going to have to go to a legislative level to get larger festivals, mid-sized festivals, to do the bare minimum so things like this cannot happen over and over again? Or do you think it's just going to be, hopefully they'll do something and contact one of you guys or your agencies?
I'll take a stab at that because we're not at that level yet, but we're talking to two very, very large insurance companies, and without getting into politics, generally speaking, with publicly traded companies, when you start messing with their money, things will happen more quickly than when they happen through the House or the Senate. So we're making some very objective empirical math cases to them that if you don't do this, you're going to lose your ass on the P&L. And that has been a lot more effective than lobbying Congress and lobbying people. And the crazy thing is the ethics are the same. Like this is a health and safety initiative. This is so people, our kids can go to conferences and festivals and concerts and be safe. But the nasty part of capitalism is until you really show the P&L, it's not always first tree. So the approach we're taking, and we're hoping that people will join us on this, is just showing when you do this. And I thought, Conway, you hit it dead on. It's really just, what is the risk appetite? What does the board look like? But especially when companies are public, when you can highlight, you know, the actual losses and damages from an Astro World and how that rolled up from a Scoremore to a Live Nation to a Liberty Media, and what did that mean to the EPS and the shareholders, then you can make a pretty good case that it's not really a question of ethics, it's a question of return, and it quiets the room pretty quickly. So I'm more pessimistic personally on the state of our bureaucracy right now and pushing those things through, but I guess a long way of saying I hope it doesn't have to go that route because it's just so long and expensive and arduous.
I would just say that the consumer, right? We all want to feel safe in these places. And I think just from my perspective, from the safety industry, it has to be the people that are demanding that the cities these events are in know what they're doing. And so just like the city of Chicago, right, they have minimum standard requirements for anyone who's looking to do a certain type of event in any of their venues, any of their spaces. But every festival goer should be asking, what's the safety plan? Because nowadays with everything that's been happening, we know it could happen at any time, anywhere, any city. But we as event planners, I'm not an event planner, I'm on the manufacturing side, but we have a duty of care, like Gareth has said, to take care of not only our festival goers, but our staff. We need to protect, first and foremost, our workers, our people. And the cities themselves have to set those standards, but the festival goers also have to have that front of mind.
Yeah, and just one final point on that. I think let's not beat around the bush here. Like, look at what's going on in recent times. We are becoming a target. This is obvious. So I think yes, ultimately we would want that to happen, but one would hope that through what we're seeing globally, that it's making any event planner wanting to secure the safety of their artists, their people, their community, and, like Marina said, their staff, ever so more important.
I just want to add one thing to that. Is anybody here an event producer or promoter? Okay, so if someone were to tell you that you could literally save money, like spend less money in your insurance if you did some of these things, you would do it. You would do it. You would say, everybody has tight P&Ls. Everybody, doesn't matter if you're public or private, wants a profitable event. So that's the goal, is for us to all work together and go to these insurance companies, these providers, and show them the empirical math that if these companies, if these event promoters and producers put in these best practices, there will be less claims, less liability. You need to be, we as a provider need to be incentivizing the people taking the risk. Starting a new festival, you should be encouraged to do these things financially. So that's the goal. And it would be even more amazing if there was some sort of bill or write-off or rebate from a government, tax incentive to do that. But I think we're further away from that than the private providers.
As vendors, whether it's labor, program productions, and pro crews, or television trucks, we have $1 million policies. We have incredible liability policies that we have to show and carry a ton of insurance to not only protect our employees, but to protect people from getting hit by a camera. We carry a ton of insurance, as all of our companies do.
Hi, my name is Matisi. Thank you so much for speaking with us this afternoon. Really appreciate all of your time. I have a question or two about surveillance, and I understand that so many of these different aspects, especially about safety for staff members, it's a two-pronged thing. You want to make sure that the audience remains safe from, anything from a fight breaking out to harassment, or you also want to make sure that all of your staffers, all of your, event booths, people at all of these things are safe. I was just wondering, do you believe that right now that the budget is increasing for surveillance across larger scale events, or do you think that it's, kind of taking a step back in comparison to a lot more of these, with budget constraints in mind, making sure that, screening is much more of, a priority in comparison to surveillance? And then one follow-up question to that on kind of outside surveillance thing. How do you guys feel about current protections against drone surveillance as a part of, larger scale events and making sure that, these things happen less and less over time?
Well, I'll answer the drone surveillance first. There's still a lot of issues with public laws about flying drones over people. You can't even, usually, unless it's a little community in Iowa or something. I'm not dissing Iowa, but I know in Chicago you can't fly a drone over. You can fly a drone over basketball or professional players like football players, basketball players, baseball players. But in Chicago you can't fly a drone over paying patrons unless they all sign a release. So it gives you like if you see the drone. In fact, we were talking earlier today. Foo Fighters were at Bonnaroo and they had a drone. And it was incredible sunset. But the drone was off to the side. He wasn't over the crowd. Or he or she, whatever. So it was just one of the beautiful concerts I'd ever seen on Hulu. I think it was on last summer. But again, that stuff, there's still too much, as we talk about insurance issues. The drone crashes in the crowd and knocks out 3 people, whatever. Now about the surveillance thing, you're right. We did have a big discussion with the city of Chicago and Coachella, the festival, about surveillance. And I don't think it was ever resolved. I think it's kind of an issue that we do it. It's done for safety purposes. But I don't think they really love doing it. I think they do it for safety. They don't do it for anything else. I don't know does that answer your question? It's still kind of an issue people feel about because it's all about safety these days. We all get tracked. Everything we download, we get tracked. So there is an issue about too much or lack of privacy, I guess. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think from a technical and a desire perspective, there's no doubt that the tide is rising for the desire on surveillance. I think what most of my clients have been very, very tiptoey about is getting on the wrong side of that narrative where now their fans are like, why is Festival A big brothering me? But I'll tell you that behind the scenes, they all have an ops trailer somewhere with camera feeds to at least look at minimum gates and primary entry points and whatnot. And I think that's kind of been, everybody's waiting for one big domino to go first and to do it well, because the few that have tried, like Red Rock's got a huge backlash a couple years ago with even just with Amazon's Palm. It wasn't even a facial thing. It was their palm print, and they went nuts and ended up U-turning and pulling it out completely. So I think that there's no doubt the desire by the event producers, because they know that they want more, whether it's just general surveillance or even more specific, blacklisting a certain face and knowing, hey, this person, if they try to come through, it's going to set off an alarm. But I think everybody's so afraid of the consumer's mistake of it that no one really wants to try to do it that fully yet. There's definitely been some good signs though. There's a company called Wicket that has made some really good progress, and I've started to see them in a lot of major sporting venues where, but they're pitching it more as the convenience to the customer, which is that you don't have to wait in long lines to scan your ticket. You just walk up, it scans you, says welcome to the event, and less about, oh, it's for the security. And I think that narrative has actually allowed them to get a lot further by pitching the consumer convenience side than they did on the enhanced watchdog side of the festival, or venue, I should say.
I'll just make a really quick comment. I think we all need to be open to adjusting our outlook on surveillance and drones as a whole. If you are carrying a weapon or something that's destructive into a festival, you should be concerned about drones and surveillance. If you're not, you should not be concerned about drones and surveillance. And that's kind of the end of the conversation when we talk to our customers and clients. We're working with, I'll tell you one of the companies we just brought on, they're called Skydio. I'd encourage you to look them up. They're unbelievable. These things go 40 miles an hour. They're AI enabled. They could go through a forest and not hit a twig. These are the same things they use in Ukraine. Obviously, these are not weaponized. These are civilian drones. And these are literally in the sky, and they're only trained by law, by the FAA, to look for guns, weapons of mass destruction, these kind of things. It'll live feed into the police. So this is just a natural evolution of safety technology. A drone over a parking lot in the gorge would have prevented that accident and that camping incident, and those families would not be grieving their dead children. So I think when it comes to personal security and protection and likeness, these things are just secondary to people who want to just go enjoy safe environments.
A few summers back, my wife and I got into a scary situation at a stage change where there was a restriction to get into the next stage that was the headliner, and it was a crush, and this was It was terrifying. What are the best practices about stage changes and shifts to make sure that people don't crush each other at a big festival?
Patrick's. I mean, I can answer it too.
Well, one of the things they've done in Salt Lake City, Utah, and indoor venues anyhow, is they don't have festival seating anymore. There has to be chairs on the ground, so you can't have a crush of people charging the stage. They'd have to go down the aisle and find their seat. At an open, I worked an event, it was the Kilby Block Party, where they had a stage on one side of end of the street and a stage on the other end, and there was the back and forth. I think all you can do is have more volunteers, more security, and more people there that are directing the patrons and letting them know that, hey, we're rocking, we're not running. Just more people on the ground, especially during that stage change. There just has to be more people, in my opinion, to control them, and or you could put up barricades that it's not a straight line. They have to go through a cattle corral. That's what I always say.
Yeah. It could also be a scheduling. I mean, if they allow more time between sets, then you can be more leisurely when you leave or go in. I don't know how they schedule their bands, but I'm assuming that's an issue. The scheduling of, changing it over the stage and stuff.
They could also do staggered entry times, so a different ticket allows you into that area at a different time, and you have to have, obviously you have to have gates and people there, but these 100 tickets get in at this time, these 100 tickets get in at this time, and it's a staggered stage change. But again, it would require more time in between sets.
So we're out of time for our safety panel, but everybody here is open and available and a resource. That's what's so great about FestForums. So they'll be around today. We're upstairs at the cocktail party, and right after we're going to be outside. I think there's another panel, right? Yeah. So we don't want to take up their time. But thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. So happy that you were here with everybody, and thank you all for your questions.